Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I am joined by Tessa. You might know her on Instagram as at Books as Meals. So let's dig into our first course and talk about food horror.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to your podcast since probably before 2018 when you had Rachel as like your
Oh,
co-host.
wow.
Yeah, I love your podcast.
Thank you so much. I was so excited to have you on. Listeners, if you don't follow Books as Meals on Instagram, you absolutely have to. It's just this very interesting review style for horror books where you kind of pair books with food.
Yes,
How did
that's how
that
you
start?
describe it. Um, so there were a few catalysts to this, I would say. There's like three things that happened. The first thing was so I was working at a bank and going back to school for graphic design, and my coworker and me at the time when at the bank would get very bored easily because there was nothing to do. It was like a very slow bank. There was no customers ever. But we weren't allowed to like read or go on our phones or do anything except like read bank procedures or talk to each other. And so we would ask each other like progressively weirder questions as we were there. And so my favorite question that one of us asked, which I don't remember who asked this, but we asked, if you were a breakfast item, what would you be? And it was kind of just like this personality question. And we went like super detailed into it and just like describing like the type of food we would be. And then we proceeded to describe every other person in the office, like what they would be like. Oh, this person's like leftover pizza that they like took out of the fridge in the morning. And like, depending on like if we like them or not. And so that question like always stuck in my mind. And then like fast forward May 2020, I graduated with my degree and it was like the height of the pandemic. And I was like, this is the most useless degree that I could have gotten. Like, why didn't I become a nurse or something? Like actually that saves lives or something. Um, and so I was still working at the bank, but I just had like longer stretches of time to read. And so I was reading a ton of horror books. And I was just jealous of how people could review books so well. And I feel like I just didn't have that skill, like of describing things. It was always just like, oh, I liked the book or I didn't. And so I always wanted to like review books, but I just didn't know how. And then I was reading Foe by Ian Reid, which I know you have read Ian Reid. I think probably all his books. I don't think he only has like three, but
Yeah.
he's one of my favorite authors. And I just like while I was reading it, I just was like, this is such a breakfast book. Like I don't know why. It was just like this is a breakfast book to me. And so I just decided like I'm gonna try reviewing books as meals and like what the tone of the book is and try to like capture that as a meal and then describe it through that. And so that's like the origin story.
I love that. I look forward to those every time a new one pops up on my feed. Like, yeah, how I guess are there books where you struggle a bit more with like finding what the food pairing is going to be? And do you ever pick just foods that are mentioned in the story?
Yeah, both of those things. Like there's so many books that I love, but I just can't figure out what I would use as a meal. And sometimes I'll like reread them too to like try and like determine it. Like Monstrilio, I love that book, but I just could not think of a meal for it that like worked. And yeah, so it is hard, but and yeah, I do sometimes pick food that's like in like I think I'm thinking of ending things. It's like, that Dairy Queen when they go
Yeah.
to and get like a blizzard. Like I was like, it just has to be that.
Yeah.
It's like a cold move or it's a cold book, so it's like in the winter time. But yeah, and so now I feel like I have to ask you what you would be if you were a
I
breakfast
was
item.
okay, good. I was thinking about this. I want to say I think I would be a waffle, maybe like a frozen Eggo waffle.
Ooh, nothing on top?
Butter and syrup, maybe a side of bacon.
Okay.
What
Okay.
about you? What
That's
was
good.
your answer for it?
I feel like it changes. Right now, I feel like I'm blueberry pancakes and a grapefruit because I'm just like a sweet and sour vibes. I don't know. But Yeah, I like asking that question because I feel like you can just figure out someone's personality through it really well.
Oh no, what are you gathering
No,
from my
yours is good.
frozen
You
Eggo
got
waffle?
no, that's good vibes. I mean, I just think of Stranger Things with Eggos.
That's true. That's true. I wasn't thinking that. But yeah, I'm just like I feel like down to earth, not super
Uh-huh.
complicated, still yummy.
Easygoing,
Yeah.
easygoing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chill but complex.
Chill but complex. I like that.
Oh man. Well, I'm so excited. We decided to do food horror. There is a lot here. I feel like, especially in recently in movies, there's been a bit more
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
this trend
yeah.
in food horror. But why do you think they make such a good pairing?
I thought about this a lot. I was trying to figure it out, but I feel like in normal conditions, food is supposed to be like this very cozy, like safe thing that you have and you share it with a family and friends and it's like you eat for survival and life. Um so I feel like it's really fun when horror flips it on its head where you're like afraid of eating something or you're like you don't know what you're consuming or you're being
Yes.
forced to eat something disgusting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a bit of that in horror of the like I don't know what's in here.
Mhm.
I think also like I love watching food prep scenes in movies and I love like the violence that there is in horror like when it's like a violent food prep scene and I just keep thinking of the opening credits to Dexter where he's like cutting open the yolk and it's like going everywhere and it's just
Yes.
like violently cracking the eggs. Yeah, and I think it's visually just so visceral and you can do a
Mhm.
lot with food. And I think, as with a lot of horror, you have like a physiological reaction to it, like either disgust or like mouth watering.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's totally true. And I feel like our culture is all about like indulgence and like over consuming things and there's just a lot to go off of.
Which I think we've seen that in the stuff that's been coming up that I think is getting into class and this indulgence and
Mhm.
critiquing like this ultra fine dining as we talked about off air. Like there's a lot of a certain type of horror story that's told with food horror, and I would say that's with, like, exploitation and, like, who is being exploited
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
make this meal, in what way?
And I feel like there's a lot of food taboos and cultures, like,
Mhm.
as Americans or like in the West, we're so grossed out by people eating, horses or cats or dogs. It's like, absolutely disgusting to us. But then like we're over here in America eating hot dogs and it's just like totally normal to us. And it's absolutely disgusting how they make hot dogs. But yeah, I just feel like there's so many food taboos.
Definitely. Well, speaking of hot dogs, I actually just read, um, Jamie Loftus's book, Raw Dog, which kind of goes into, like, the history of hot dogs and, like, labor and,
Oh,
like, all kinds of stuff. It was, like, a very fascinating and funny deep dive, so it was a good audiobook.
was it
It's
nonfiction?
nonfiction, yeah.
Oh, I would totally read or listen to that.
I recommend it, and she's a good audiobook narrator. She's a podcaster too. Oh, I was also thinking about scenes that have traumatized me as a child, and I was looking back, and there are a lot of food related horror scenes
Mhm.
that traumatized me. Starting off with Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I don't know if you're familiar, but yeah, there's a scene like close to the end where they're in this like dream diner and Freddy
Uh,
is there and he's eating like a pizza with sausages, but the sausages are like sentient and they're the faces of the of the teenagers he's killed.
oh my gosh.
And I was like so young when I saw this, and I had convinced myself this was a fever dream that I made up because it was just so wild that I didn't think this actually was a thing that I saw.
I need to watch that. I don't remember that. I don't even know if I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street 4, but that sounds really good.
It was just so wild. Um, then in Hannibal, the
Mhm.
movie, um, there's a scene where like Julianne Moore as Clarice walks in and it's just like Hannibal Lecter and Ray Liotta and he's making like Ray Liotta eat this soup and Ray Liotta just has like a dumb smile and is talking about how delicious this soup is. And then spoilers, Hannibal Lecter tells her that it's his own brain, like he's eating his own
Oh my
brain in a
gosh.
soup. And he like pulls back the hat to show. Traumatizing.
That's horrifying.
And then the Chinese food scene in the It miniseries,
Mhm.
where it, like, splashes into blood and it's, like, alive and it's, like
Yeah, it's terrifying.
so three visceral.
Yeah, those are yeah, yeah. I also would say, well, this isn't, like, that traumatizing, but in Spirited Away, the food scene with the parents, so
Yes.
it's, the girl and her parents stumble upon this abandoned amusement park, and there's just, like, this array of delicious foods, and then the girl's like, "Oh, like, we shouldn't eat that," and the parents are like, "No, it's fine, like, we'll just eat it," and they're just eating, well, it looks amazing,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the dumplings, and they're just, like, gorging on it, and then they turn into pigs. So that scene always stuck with me.
Absolutely, I can see that. I will say I watched Spirited Away for the first time as an adult, but I remember seeing it and thinking this would have traumatized me as
Yeah,
a child.
yeah.
But as an adult, I'm like, that food looks really good
It
though,
looks so
so
good.
I get it. I
Yeah,
fully
no, I
understand. I
totally get it.
probably would also want a little.
I know, and it was just like it was hot food, it was ready for them. There's just nobody
Yeah,
around.
they offered to pay.
Yeah, they did.
Oh man. Well, speaking of food horror movies, should we talk
Mhm.
about some ones we've seen recently?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, probably starting off with The Menu. I would say it's probably what started this idea for this episode.
Yeah, and it was like that was last year that it
Hmm.
came out, right? Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a very recent movie, and I was very excited to see it. Just, like, seeing the trailer for it, I was just so excited. I was the whole thing with the pretentious food critics going to this exclusive island to eat,
Yes.
um yeah, private island for the rich, basically.
Yes. I will say it didn't go where I thought it was going to go. I feel like the trailers and everything kind of set it up where you're like, oh, I know where this story's going. It's going to be
Mhm.
revealed that, and it wasn't. It was a different thing.
Yeah, it was a different twist, which I appreciated.
The waitress was my favorite. She's like, that is a tortilla. A tortilla. Like the way she said it killed me.
Yeah.
Also came out last year, Fresh on
Mhm.
Hulu, which I
Yeah,
absolutely loved.
I love that movie too. I don't know if we can, like, talk about it too much with spoilers, but basically it was, a woman meets a man in a grocery store. I don't remember what happens, but she wakes up and she's, like, chained to the floor.
Yeah, they're going on like a couple's like getaway for the weekend, and she's like at his
Oh,
house
yeah.
cabin
Yeah,
and she has like a drink. He offers her a drink and then she gets a little woozy and then she wakes up
and then she wakes up.
chained to a room
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
a horrifying realization.
But the ending to that movie, really appreciated.
I know. It's gonna be tough to talk around these. But yeah, I don't want to spoil like a bunch of movies that
Mhm.
you have just come out. Honestly, even ones that haven't come out yet. Like I'm gonna talk about Dumplings from 2004, which I am recommending with the caveat that it is very dark. It has some comedic elements, but it's pretty dark. Also, so many mouth noises, so many like chewing, eating, slurping sounds. So if that bothers you, I'm just letting you know, like, don't watch it with headphones. This is a movie from Hong Kong, and it's about an actress who hears about these dumplings that can reverse aging. And the movie kind of opens up with her going to this apartment complex and knocking on the door and meeting this woman. And she's like, is this where I can get the dumplings that everyone talks about? And she's like, yeah, come on in. And she's a little hesitant to even try the dumplings until the woman tells her like, how old do you think I am? And she says like, I don't know, in your 30s. And she's like, exactly, so eat the dumplings.
That kinda reminds me of a short story we have on our list.
Hmm.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I have another movie on the list, which I don't know if I actually liked it, but it's called Delicatessen. It is a French movie. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world where food is in short supply, and this butcher lives in, like, the bottom of an apartment building. I think he's, like, the landlord, and he posts job opportunities in the newspaper looking for men as, like, maintenance workers, and he basically lures them in to use them as a cheap meat substitute to sell. That comes in, like, pretty early in the movie, so it's not really a spoiler, but it's just a really bizarre movie. It's by the same director who made Amelie.
Okay.
So
Okay, it had a very quirky vibe, so that
yeah,
makes so much sense.
yes. Yeah. I just wish the story was better. I don't know. There was just something about it that didn't work for me, but it was fun, kind
Mhm.
of.
And I think if we're talking about stylized horror and food, we have to at least mention the Hannibal TV series, which
Yes.
I think had I'm to this day still shocked that it aired on just cable because it would have like the most gruesome
Did
like
it really?
kills and murders, and then it would cut to these like beautiful like works of art like gourmet dishes. So I think it was just a property that really married those two things, like
Hmm.
the viscera of both and everything just so well.
Yeah. Okay, so I hadn't heard of this movie, but I saw it on your list, so I watched it last night. It's called The Stuff. This movie's from 1985. So it's very 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. And so everyone becomes obsessed with this yogurt ice cream
Yeah.
substance that they like find in the snow.
Yeah,
It's like
which
bubbling.
I love that their first reaction was like this, yeah, this like bubbling, gurgling like goo. I'm gonna touch it and then like lick my fingers.
Yeah, yeah. And this guy's just like this old man's just like obsessed with it. He's like, "Oh, this is so good." And then the other guy comes over and tries it too. It's like, why would you eat that?
Yeah. Yeah, but then it becomes, yeah, packaged and sold like worldwide all over the country, and people like they can't keep it on the shelves, and people are
Hmm.
obsessed with this, but
Yes.
they aren't sure, like, first of all, what it is. Nobody knows what this is and what the after effects are. And there's like a big conspiracy. It's like a
Yeah.
whole thing. There's
Yeah,
like
there's a lot of go ahead.
there's a lot of that. I was gonna say there's just like one kid who doesn't want to eat it, doesn't even want to try it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was a movie about food horror. I mean, we have to add
Yeah.
it to the list.
Yeah. Rampant consumerism of the 80s.
Hmm.
This episode is brought to you by Libro FM. Libro FM is the first and only company which lets you purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore. You can pick from more than 150,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there. You know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to get more books into your busy life. Listen during your commute, while doing chores, walking the dog, or just relaxing at home. All you need is a smartphone and the free Libro FM app. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations and curated lists from people who know audiobooks best. Booksellers. And us. We also have a playlist on there full of books that have been recommended on this podcast. Books in the Freezer special offer. You get 2 audiobooks for the price of one, just $14.99, with your first month of membership using code FreezerBook. This offer is valid for new members in Canada and the United States. Thank you, Libro FM, for supporting the show. Well, are we ready to talk about some books?
Yes.
I'm starting off with a book I read recently that I absolutely adored, and that is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is about a woman named Dorothy Daniels, who at one time in her life was a successful food critic. And the book you're reading now is the memoir that she's writing from jail as she's recounting her childhood, full of farm to table cuisine, like her relationship with her mother, her sexual exploits, the first time she put an ice pick through a man's neck on Fire Island and burned the house down. A journey where she's just embraced what she loves. Um, this is just absolutely perfect if you love first person, like sociopath POV. And she is so funny because she just is completely unapologetic in the way that she lays out what happened. There is no emotion. She was this very successful food critic, and so she does have her like little rants where she talks about food, and she's so pretentious, and I just like loved her as a character because of all of those things. And I will say, when I see reviews, those are the things people hate, but it's what made it was just her voice as she recounts all these things. So here's a quote. Eat what you love, they say. And I have, but that's facile. It's not merely that I loved Giovanni, Andrew, Gil, and Marco. It's also that I lost them. And it's not merely that I loved and lost them. It's also that I hated them. As much as they were my lovers, they were my enemies, which is more or less all you can hope for from a person with whom you do not share DNA. Like, she's just very funny and snarky.
She's extremely pretentious. Yes.
Yes. Did you read it?
I did read it. I read it last week. I had so many people recommending me this book, and so I had really high expectations, which I think is why I didn't like it as much as I wish I had liked it.
Hmm.
But I feel like after you like read your description of it, I liked it a little more, like hearing like your thoughts behind it. But yeah, I think she did an amazing job with her food descriptions. That was probably my favorite part of the book.
I was trying to find some, but I bought the audiobook, so it was hard for me to go back and like find quotes. But yes, the food descriptions, like the food writing was so good. I'm like, yeah, that
Mhm.
is like how a food critic would write
Would
about
talk.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to it on audio too, and I would say the narrator's really she did a
Hmm.
really great job.
I don't know. I thought it was really funny in her tone, but also just like the things that go wrong, like when she's trying to like talk her way out of the ticket, or like when she's like floating in the ocean, like after she falls off the boat. Like I just feel like there's a lot of those like funny little things that happened that I still
Mhm.
think about. Um, so I would say this is high fridge freezer. The gore is pretty high. Like this is not like
Mhm.
a give it to anyone type of book, but the tone is kind of funny and it's kind of like snarky and removed. So I'm putting it there. High fridge, possibly freezer. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So that is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers.
My first book, this one kind of goes beside A Certain Hunger, Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterica. Have you read this one?
Yes.
Do you? Okay. Um, so it's about a man who works at a local processing plant. He slaughters humans, but they don't call them that. They call it like special meat, I think.
Yeah.
So his wife has left him. I feel like I forget what happened. She just kind of like went away. So animal meat is poisonous to humans, and so the government have initiated the transition, and so now everybody's eating special meat, which is just humans. And so the main character is one day given a gift, which is a live specimen. It's just like a woman. He's forbidden to have any sort of like personal contact with her. But, little by little, he doesn't have his wife anymore. So he starts treating her like a human being.
And yeah, his relationship with her progresses throughout the story.
Yeah, they get closer.
Yeah.
Things happen off page, I would say. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, like something happens. And then the last line in the book is just incredibly disturbing.
Yeah. That was a gut punch of a like jaw drop
Hmm.
book for me. Yeah, the world building in that was so good. Just the meeting with the vendors and the way they talked about things and just the way things are in this world now and the way that everybody just accepts it
Hmm. Yeah, it
was,
did feel real to me. Like it was like,
yeah.
oh, this could probably happen.
Yeah, it was very, very well written. I love this book. So where would you rate it?
I would, I would say freezer.
Yeah, I
Right?
would
I mean, it's
agree.
pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
I also like that book is like very upfront about cannibalism. Like that's not the twist. The twist
Yeah.
isn't the cannibalism part.
Yeah, the cannibalism is like the premise.
Hmm. Exactly.
Like, listen, this is a story about cannibalism, just so you know.
Yeah.
Fully. Fully. It's not going to be revealed later. This is a story about cannibalism.
Yes. So this was Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Basterica.
Love it. I read a graphic novel called Hungry Ghosts, or I think it's technically Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts by the late Anthony Bourdain, Joel Rose, and Alberto Ponticelli. And this is available on Hoopla for free if your library uses Hoopla. So this is, I think, a really good pairing with The Menu. This is about a Russian oligarch who is having this very exclusive dining experience, and he dares a group of the chefs to participate in this samurai game called 100 Candles, where the room is lit with 100 candles. Each chef has to tell like a scary supernatural story and then like look at themselves in the mirror and pray they survive. So this was
Mhm.
based off of a real game from the Japanese Edo period, and then each story centers around food.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
like an anthology?
Kind of, yeah, it was like a little short story collection type of thing, but in a graphic novel.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're all interesting. So, rating wise, it's gonna vary because it's a short story collection, and
Mhm.
like with most short stories, some stories are scarier than others, some stories are better than others, and so it was like a little uneven in that way.
Mhm.
And I will say also going into this, if you weren't familiar with Anthony Bourdain, a lot of these are pretty crass. Like there's a lot of like butt stuff. So
Oh.
yeah, just like know that going in. And then yeah, there's like sexual assault, like just things you should know before diving into this one. But
Okay.
I loved the food stuff, and of course there was recipes in the back.
Oh, I
Which
love
I
that.
know. I'm always like, yes, give me the recipes in the back of the
Yes.
book. But yeah, that was a pretty fun read though. That is Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts by Anthony Bourdain, Joel Rose, and Alberto Ponticelli.
Okay. My next pick is Carpenter's Farm by Josh Mallerman. So this is a serialized novel that was written during the pandemic, and it's free to read on Josh's website.
Okay.
It's about a group of thespian friends, so they're all like actors, who travel from New York to Michigan to check on their friend who's doing a little too good in the country. He's just inherited his uncle's farm, and he's just like living there alone. And so they go and visit him, and he's just like completely different than how he was before. He's just like very calm, and he invites them inside and they have dinner together, and that's when everything goes wrong. And it's just very unsettling, and I would say a read alike is I'm thinking of ending things, specifically when the protagonist and her boyfriend are in the home in the farm and they're eating at the dinner table. It's very much like that. It's just very
Got it.
unsettling, and you don't know like why, but yeah, it was just creepy. And so I definitely think this would be in the freezer. Like it definitely has some freezer burn on it.
It sounds really good though. I'm gonna go read this.
I would also say sometimes it's hard to read on screens like on your computer, but whoever did the website design did a really nice job at like the color background. Like it's not just like white
Okay.
with black
Okay.
text. So it's really nice to read.
Well, that's good that they put
Yes.
thought into that. It made it a little more accessible.
Yes. That was Carpenter's Farm by Josh Mallerman.
Okay. All right. Well, my last pick tonally is going to be pretty different. It is Food Fright by Nico Bell. And Nico Bell came on, I think, last year, and we talked about campy horror. And this absolutely falls into that. This is one of the Rewind or Die series of novels on Kindle Unlimited, or like novels, novellas. But they all are supposed to be reminiscent of like VHS horror and kind of be a little like wild and reminiscent of that style. So this fits perfectly into that. The story is about hazing, witchcraft, and revenge. But this is about a girl named Cassie who just wants to fit in. And now she's like finally on the varsity soccer team. She thinks like things are finally going to look up for me. Um, but they don't. The hazing continues until a prank goes wrong. And this is a story about anthropomorphic evil food.
I love that.
It is so fun, so bonkers, so just absolutely bananas that if you want something that's still like, I mean, stuff happens. This is a horror novella, but it's still kind of fun. I think this is
So
a good pick for that.
would you say it's a little bit like The Stuff
Um,
with like the zaniness, or is it
kind
different than
of.
that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a little bit darker, question mark.
Okay.
It's like maybe a little darker, but yeah, like definitely like that zany. I mean, this is all like happening in like a home ec classroom at a high school. Like
Oh, that sounds good.
It was just really fun, and I don't even know how she thought of this premise. Like, I would love to know. I would say it's pretty room temperature. Yeah, a lot of fun. And like I said, it is available on Kindle Unlimited and it is part of that Rewind or Die series along with like Cirque Berserk. So
Okay.
that is Food Fright by Nico Bell. And also, I've had people ask the Rewind or Die series doesn't need to be read in order. They're all standalone novels. They just all kind of have that premise, not premise, but that like vibe.
Are they all written by Nico Bell?
No,
Oh, okay. So they're all different.
yeah, it's a publisher, Unnerving, that did the Rewind or Die series. So yeah, it's like a bunch like V Castro has like a Rewind or Die book.
Okay. My next pick is also kind of on a different tone. So I picked Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald
Love it.
Dahl.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like if I had to write a dissertation on a book, it would be this one because there's so much to unpack in the story. Both the book and the movie. I mean, they follow each other pretty well. So I think everybody is aware of like what this book is about, but briefly, it's about a boy and his family who are starving and incredibly poor, and the boy is obsessed with chocolate and he finds a golden ticket to go to this chocolate factory. And Willy Wonka is basically the villain because he owns this factory and he lures kids in with candy and chocolate and sweets. He exploits his workers, the poor Oompa Loompas. He, basically stole them from their home and enslaved them and pays them in cacao beans. And they just have to like live there. Um, and then throughout the story, every child, I don't know if they die. It's kind of like unsure if they die, but Augustus falls into the chocolate river and he's sucked up through the pipes to be turned into fudge. And the Oompa Loompas are just like singing about it. And then Violet eats gum and turns into a blueberry, and they have to roll her out to juice her. So I feel like there's just a lot of dark undertones. And this book or movie, it's not very scary, but I would put it in the fridge, but I still think it is an important food horror book.
When you put it on the list, I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
right. And also I found out that there's a prequel coming out called Wonka with Timothy Chalamet as young Wonka,
Okay.
and that's coming out this year. I don't know what it's going to entail, but I want to see it.
Yeah. Is it gonna be like how he found the Oompa Loompas? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
don't know.
What are we covering in here?
Yeah, what are we in for?
Okay.
So that was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl.
Okay. We did have a few honorable mentions because there's a lot of food horror, like we mentioned. Like I wanted to mention another graphic novel series that I've mentioned, I feel like a few times on the podcast. So I didn't want it to be one of my picks, but I couldn't not talk about Eat the Rich by Sarah Gailey, which is about this is also available on Hoopla if your library has Hoopla. But this is about a woman who is going to go meet her boyfriend's family for the first time, and they live in this very wealthy area. And she comes to find out they are like very wealthy, like extremely wealthy. And as she becomes more a part of that, she kind of learns more behind the scenes stuff, like what sustains them, which is different than what sustains other people. And it's kind of a known open thing in that area and for the people that work there. And I mean, it is a big metaphor about like exploitation and that these billionaires literally run on poorer people and the poor people have no options but to volunteer for this exploitative system knowing that it's going to be their demise.
Gosh. Wait, is this a book or a short story?
It's a graphic novel like series
Oh,
like you
graphic
said
novel.
or it's
Okay.
a yeah.
Yeah, I want to read that too.
It was nominated for a Stoker this year, which was cool.
I'm surprised I haven't heard of it. I've heard of Sarah Gailey, but
Hmm.
yeah. So I want to mention The Horror of Dolores Roach. So this is a scripted story podcast that I listened to a long time ago, so I've forgotten a lot of the details to this, but a woman returns to her New York neighborhood that has drastically changed since she's been away. Her boyfriend's missing and her family's gone, and her only friend is a man who owns the empanada shop. So he gives her the basement apartment below the shop as long as she gives massages, and then that's how she like receives cash. And I just remember being really fascinated and grossed out by this, but it was really fun to listen to on a road trip.
Ooh, that is interesting. I know I saw the thumbnail for this when the podcast came out, and I think I saw a trailer. Like they're making it a series, right?
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't
Oh
know.
yeah. I'll have to send it to you. I'm pretty sure I
Okay.
saw a trailer pop up the other day. And then one I made you read was The Emperor's Old Bones by Gemma Files, which my friend Laura made me read. So I'm just like passing
Passing
on the trauma.
it. It was that was a really creepy book. Like that was one where I was like, I need to make a meal on this because
Yeah.
it was just and I read it once all the way through and then the second time I kind of like read it again because I felt like I was missing certain things with the boy. Like was he being like enslaved by this woman?
I didn't go through it thoroughly a second time, but I was just kind of refreshing my memory, kind of like glancing over it. And I'm like, there's a lot going on here with this like Ellis narrator
Yeah.
relationship. Like, what is
Yeah.
going
So
on?
basically, it's kind of told in like flashbacks
Hmm.
about a boy. I don't know if I think his family died or like moved away, and this woman has kind of like taken over as his guardian.
Yeah, she was about
And
to rob them,
yeah,
and he was like the only one
he
left
was there.
in the house. And she was like, all right, I guess
And
I take care of you now.
yeah, yeah. But like she wasn't a good person.
No. Yeah, she was like a criminal.
Yeah, she introduces him to a dish called the Emperor's Old Bones. And so I'm not going to say anything more about that, but I would say there was a quote in it that I saved that I just really loved. Um, because if there's one thing you taught me, Ellis, one lesson I've retained throughout every twist and turn of this snaky thing I call my life, it's that hunger has no moral structure.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes of like your moral compass and how far you're willing to go.
I need to go through and like reread it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot about the narrator's relationship with Ellis and how he views her and what she means to him and all the
Hmm.
different layers there are to him and like the respect and like what place she holds in his life even now as an adult, you know.
Yeah. And I found this online to read. Like I just found it on a website. Is that how you found it too or read
Yeah,
it?
it's for
Okay.
you can read it for free at I think it's
Yeah.
nightmaremagazine.com.
And it won an award. It won like International Guild of Horror Award.
Yeah, I saw that. It won something, but yeah,
Hmm.
deserved.
Yeah, deserved. Well deserved.
And then there was a book you sent me.
Yes.
Which
Mama
one?
Bird. Did you read it?
I did. I did.
Yeah, so Mama Bird by Clay McLeod Chapman. So he came out with these little chapbooks. I
Hmm.
just got the second one. I haven't read it yet, but Mama Bird, I mean, we can't go into too much detail, but basically it's about a mom and her child. The child's like a very picky eater, and the mother will do anything to feed her child.
Yeah, the desperation, the lengths a mother will go.
Hmm. Did you relate to it?
No, I mean my kids are picky eaters, but they're the normal like I only eat chicken nuggets and barbecue sauce, like
Yeah.
picky eaters. I didn't have to go to this length, thank goodness.
Okay, okay. But you'll know what to do if you have
Yeah,
to.
thank you, Clay. Now I know.
Okay, I also feel like I couldn't not mention Hansel and Gretel from the Brothers Grimm. I feel like this is the first food horror story ever, right? Two kids are abandoned in a forest, starving, and they come upon a gingerbread candy cottage house, and a witch is trying to lure them in and fatten them up to eat them, and then they end up pushing the witch in the oven and killing her. I just spoiled the whole thing, but everybody knows this story.
I will always think of Morticia Addams in the Addams Family movie, like telling the story to the preschoolers when she's trying to get a job as like a preschool teacher. And she's like, and Hansel and Gretel pushed the poor, defenseless witch into the oven. Now, boys and girls, what do you think that feels like? And it just cuts to like children crying. I mean, the idea of like, yeah, you're absolutely desperate and starving, and you come upon that, like, what else are you going to do? Not
Hmm.
do it? Yeah, is it the first food horror story?
That's what I came up with. Can you think of anything else?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's something I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more. And I feel like a lot of the Brothers Grimm stories have food in them or like people starving.
Willing to go to crazy lengths when you're starving.
Hmm. That's like the theme in all of these books and movies.
Yeah. Yeah, like the desperation, the drive for survival.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean there's a lot of layers to food horror. Well, one of the traditions that I have on the podcast is to ask guests for a chilling obsession. So is there something in horror you've been enjoying lately?
Yeah, so this came out a couple months ago, but I'm still thinking about it. And that is Beau is Afraid, which is by the same director who did Midsommar and Hereditary. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet, so tell me.
Yeah. It's like it's just one of those movies you can't stop thinking about after you see it. So it's supposed to be like a horror comedy. It's 3 hours long.
What?
Yeah, it's 3 hours long. And it is about so Joaquin Phoenix plays an extremely anxious man living in a crime-ridden city, and he has like the most horrifying apartment building. And like looking out his window, it's just like prostitutes, people doing drugs, people killing each other, people stabbing each other, and he's just like terrified to like leave the house, which is understandable. Um, and he's supposed to travel to see his mom, but he misses his flight because he like accidentally leaves his keys in the door and someone steals that and his luggage. And so now he can't lock the door to his apartment and he also can't leave to go on his flight. And it basically is just like a nightmare, like the worst things you could possibly think of happening. And so it's kind of one of those movies that you like, it's just like so incredibly anxious that you kind of hate it, but you also kind of love it because you can't stop thinking about it. So I don't
Yeah.
know if I would recommend it to like everyone, but it was very memorable.
That sounds very anxiety inducing. I think I
Hmm.
got that from the trailers though, that it was just like an anxiety fest.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's very different from Hereditary and Midsommar, and he goes to a place that you don't expect him to go and that you just will never forget.
All right, I'll see if I can put aside 3 hours and watch it
Yeah.
when I get a chance.
And also it like didn't make any money in the theaters. So,
It was just so weird and no one knew what it was about.
yeah. What is your chilling obsession right now?
That's a good question. I have not been really watching any horror lately. I've really not been watching anything lately. My June has been insane. So my chilling obsession right now is just trying the post Stoker Con, like coming down from that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I mean, that's a chilling obsession going to
Yeah.
StokerCon. How was it?
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. It was so exciting to get to see like people that I talked to online and have talked to for years, like in
Hmm.
person, like they really exist. They don't just exist on my Twitter feed. um, but yeah, it was at the Sheraton here in Pittsburgh, and it was the same weekend as the Eras tour. And so it
Okay.
was a clash of like Swifties and horror people, which
Oh my
was like
gosh.
really funny. Like I walked by one of the Swifties who was on the phone and she's like, I don't know, some kind of horror conference. I don't know. Everyone's in black.
She's just like pissed.
um it was really good. I went to a lot of good panels. There was like a panel on extreme and erotic horror with CJ Lead, the author of Mayfly,
Hmm.
and Haley Piper and Rath James White and Brian Keene. Um, and it's like a horror. There was a panel on like why I love horror. I went to some like author readings. Like it was really fun just getting to hang out with people and listen to people, wax poetic about what their, specialty is in horror.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Were you on a panel?
I
Yes.
was on two.
Okay. What were your panels about?
The first one was for Librarians Day for the Summer Scares program. So I was mostly talking to like librarians about how to implement like summer scares into their library. and just talking to them about the podcast and about books I'm liking. The second panel was about horror tropes that we like love and hate, and that was really fun because it was like the podcasters like me, um, Neil at Talking Scared, and Agatha at She Wore Black, and then Nat Cassidy, the author of Mary and Awakening of Terror, and Rachel Harrison. It was like the five of us
Oh my gosh, it's
talking
so fun.
talking about tropes we love and hate. So my love was the driving up to the haunted house, like hand on the leg, like I think this will be good for us.
Yes. I love haunted house stories.
I do too. I do too. I've done like 3 episodes on them though, so I think I might need a bit of a breather before
Need
I
a break. Yeah.
do
Yeah.
another one. But
But
I do love a haunted house story.
you love House of Leaves, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that book too. I think it's just like it's so unique.
Yes. I talked about it actually on the Summer Scares panel when we were talking about like what was your history with horror? And I'm like, House of Leaves got me back into reading horror. I was just like, I didn't know literature could do this. I didn't know you
Mhm.
could like push the limits to narrative structure this
Yeah.
much and stress me out with just arranging words on a page in a different way. Like I didn't know my anxiety level could like tick up from that.
Yeah, it was so unsettling the way that the text was presented on it, the page.
But yeah, I survived my 2 panels.
Good.
Had a good time. So yeah, it's been mostly trying to like recover from that. I left with like a ton of new books, and then I heard from all these authors that I'm like, well, now I have to read all of your books, and so I have this
Mhm.
like longer, way longer TBR than when I went into the con. But I hope I can go next year. Next year is San Diego, so
Ooh,
yeah,
okay. Because they change it every year.
yeah, they change it every
Okay,
year.
very cool.
So yeah, that was my chilling obsession. But the second tradition we have on this podcast is to ask our guests for a final girl song. So what would your song be?
Yes, I love this. It was really hard to think of one, as everybody says on your podcast, but I chose Heroes by David Bowie. I feel like
I
it
love that.
fits.
Did you ever watch Perks of Being a Wallflower?
No.
Okay.
Is that like the theme song?
No, it's like
Oh.
I don't know if you're familiar with like this scene where like Emma Watson is like in the back of the truck and she has like her arms out and they're going through the tunnel. But they're high schoolers in that movie, and I think that's the song that's playing in the radio where she's like, "What is this song? This is the best song I've
Oh.
ever heard," and she's like in the back of the truck.
I
So yeah,
remember it in the end of Jojo Rabbit. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't. I'm too like
Oh,
scared of being devastated.
it's so sad,
That's what
but
I've
it's so
heard.
amazing.
That's what
No, but
I've
it's
heard.
so good. It's so good. It's probably like one of my favorite movies, but that song's in it, and it's just like the perfect moment that it happens in.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I will make a point to watch it. I have heard it's good. I think I just like really struggle when I know something is going to be like emotionally devastating, like making the
Yeah,
time to like sit and
to
watch it.
prepare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, would you rather watch that or Beau is Afraid?
uh Maybe Jojo Rabbit.
Okay.
Well, I'm also dealing with like my kids are out of school now. And so they're just like always home. So it's hard for me to
Hmm.
find like a 3 hour block where I can just like watch a movie in peace and
Yeah,
not be interrupted. Which is
that's
probably not
understandable.
like ideal for a movie like But Was Afraid. Like
No,
having to stop
no,
every 20 minutes and get snacks.
no.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me about food horror.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I know there's definitely probably books we missed and movies we didn't talk about. And people are like, I can't believe you didn't talk about The Ice Cream Man or Motel Hell
Oh,
or
right.
Blood
Yep.
Diner. Like, it's going to happen.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. We can't possibly go through every movie ever.
No.
But if you know other things we could talk about, you could always comment on Instagram or Twitter or let us know like what you would pair. But yeah, thank you so much again for coming on. This was fun.
Yeah,
And
anytime.
yeah, and where can people find you online?
Books as Meals
Yeah.
on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay. Yes, and I definitely suggest following for really fun, interesting reviews. Books in the Freezer is a bi weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at Books Freezer Pod or on Instagram at TikTok at Books in the Freezer, or you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com, and the show notes are a great resource. Every book that we mentioned should be listed there, along with links and affiliate links, links to the Patreon, links to merch, just all kinds of resources. There's a link that goes right to the Books in the Freezer Final Girl playlist. So again, all that information can be found at booksinthefreezer.com. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter at lady_gagnon. That's LADY_GAGNON. Or on Instagram at That's What She Read, and that's with 2 A's. So see you next time on Books in the Freezer.